Sweetheart, I think you're confused. Economy is that way. The words sliced through the first-class cabin like a blade through silk. Victoria Ashford stood in the aisle, one hand on her hip, the other pointing toward the back of the aircraft. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled into a sleek chignon that looked like it had been engineered rather than styled. Her uniform fit like couture, tailored to emphasize every curve. Pearl earrings caught the light. Her red lipstick was sharp enough to cut glass. She wasn't just a flight attendant. She was a gatekeeper. And right now she was looking at Marcus Bennett like he was something that had wandered in from the street. Marcus stood frozen in the aisle of Flight 617 Atlas Airways flagship route from Boston to London Heathrow. He was 22 years old, 6 feet tall, with natural hair and warm brown eyes that usually radiated confidence. Today those eyes showed something else. Uncertainty. The weight of being seen but not recognized. He wore a faded MIT hoodie, the kind that came free during orientation week. His jeans were clean but worn at the knees. His Jordans had seen better days. His backpack was from a discount store, functional rather than fashionable. In his hand, he clutched his phone, the cracked screen displaying a boarding pass that read, Seat 1A. The first-class cabin of Flight 617 was a temple to luxury. Ivory leather seats wide enough to sleep in. Mahogany trim polished to a mirror shine. The smell of expensive cologne mixing with fresh coffee. Crystal champagne flutes already being distributed to the early boarders. Autumn sunlight streamed through the windows, casting everything in a golden glow that felt deliberately designed to exclude anyone who didn't belong. And, according to Victoria Ashford's cold blue eyes, Marcus Bennett did not belong. Behind him, other passengers were queuing up in the jet bridge. In front of him, the faces of first-class passengers already seated turned toward the disruption. Some curious, some irritated, all of them judging. Before we dive into what happens next, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of how they dress, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this plays out. Marcus swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. This was supposed to be the beginning of something incredible. A job interview at one of London's top cybersecurity firms. A chance to change his life, to change his mother's life. The company had sent him a first-class ticket, a gesture that had made him cry when he opened the email 3 weeks ago. Now, standing in this aisle with Victoria's manicured finger pointing him toward the exit, that dream felt like it was dissolving in real time. I have a ticket, Marcus said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Seat 1A. Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched. She didn't even look at the phone he was holding up. She just smiled, and it was the coldest thing Marcus had ever seen. Victoria Ashford had been with Atlas Airways for 15 years. She wore that tenure like armor, like proof that she understood how things worked. Who belonged, where, what standards mattered. At 38, she maintained the kind of polished appearance that required effort and expense. Her skin was flawless, her makeup professionally applied every morning at 4:30 a.m. Her nails were always perfect-shaped and painted in Atlas Airways regulation nude. Her uniform standard issue for all senior pursers had been altered by a tailor in Boston's Back Bay, nipped at the waist, hemmed to show just enough leg to be elegant rather than provocative. She smelled like Chanel No. 5, the real thing, not a department store knockoff. Her wedding ring was platinum with a modest diamond, though she'd been divorced for 3 years and kept wearing it to avoid unwanted attention. She had no children, no pets, no real life outside of these flights. The first-class cabin was her domain, her kingdom, the one place where she had absolute authority, and she was very, very good at spotting people who didn't belong. Ryan Porter stood near the galley watching the scene unfold with barely concealed excitement. At 28, he was young enough to still be eager, still trying to prove himself worthy of Victoria's approval. He'd been with Atlas for 8 months, and he'd learned quickly that Victoria Ashford was the person who mattered. Not the captain, not the ground supervisors, not even the passengers. Victoria decided who got promoted, who got the good routes, who got stuck on the overnight red-eyes to nowhere. Ryan's brown hair was slicked back with too much gel. His uniform was pressed to perfection creases sharp enough to cut. He had nervous energy hands that moved too quickly, eyes that darted around looking for problems to solve, for ways to be useful. Right now, those eyes were fixed on Marcus Bennett, and Ryan was already forming an opinion. Sophia Martinez stood behind the galley curtain, her dark eyes wide with growing alarm. At 26, she was newer than Ryan, only 3 months with Atlas Airways. This was her dream job, the culmination of years of hospitality school and customer service work. She loved flying, loved helping people, loved the idea that she was part of something bigger than herself. But right now, watching Victoria block Marcus in the aisle, Sophia felt her stomach twist. She'd pulled up the manifest on her tablet the moment Marcus boarded. She'd seen his name, his seat assignment, the note that said, "Business Recruitment Package, Full Fare." She knew his ticket was legitimate. She'd opened her mouth to tell Victoria. Then Victoria had shot her a look sharp and warning, and Sophia had closed her mouth again. She needed this job. Her family back in San Antonio depended on the money she sent home every month. She couldn't afford to make Victoria angry, but she also couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening right in front of her. Derek Morrison sat in seat 2A, directly behind where Marcus was supposed to sit. At 45, Derek was a senior partner at Blackstone Mercer, one of Boston's most prestigious investment firms. He wore a 3-piece suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His salt and pepper hair was professionally styled. His Rolex caught the light every time he moved his wrist. His Italian leather shoes were polished to a gleaming shine. Derek had been flying first class for 20 years. He considered it his natural habitat, the place where he belonged by virtue of his success, his hard work, his superior decision-making. He did not appreciate disruptions. He did not appreciate people who didn't understand the unspoken rules of spaces like this. And when he looked at Marcus Bennett standing in the aisle in a hoodie and worn jeans, Derek saw exactly one thing, a problem that needed to be removed. Amanda Cross occupied seat 1B directly beside where Marcus was supposed to sit. She was 41, a socialite whose wealth came from her late husband's pharmaceutical fortune. She wore a cashmere wrap that cost $4,000. Her handbag was Hermes real not fake, the kind with a 2-year waiting list. Her makeup was subtle but expensive, the kind that looked natural because it was applied by professionals who understood bone structure. Amanda traveled constantly, running from boredom in Boston to boredom in London to boredom in Paris. First class was the only place she felt comfortable, surrounded by people who understood that wealth was a language, a culture, a way of being. She had noticed Marcus the moment he stepped into the cabin, and her first instinct had been to pull her purse closer, as if his proximity might contaminate her belongings. Thomas Hayes sat quietly in seat 2C, observing everything with the practiced eye of a corporate attorney. At 55, he'd spent 30 years watching human behavior, learning to read people, understanding the difference between what was said and what was meant. He had silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of face that revealed nothing. Right now, he was watching Victoria Ashford, and he was making mental notes. His phone was in his hand, recording app already open, waiting. James Rivera sat in 3B an architect, returning from a conference in Boston. At 32, he was successful, well-dressed in casual professional attire, Hispanic and keenly aware of what was happening in the aisle ahead of him. He'd seen this before. He'd lived this before. His hands gripped the armrests of his seat knuckles, going white. Marcus Bennett stood at the center of all these stares, all these judgments, all these assumptions. He was 22 years old. 3 months ago, he'd graduated from MIT with a degree in computer science, 3.9 G.P.A. full academic scholarship research grants for his work on encryption algorithms. His thesis on airline security vulnerabilities had been 200 pages of brilliant, terrifying analysis of how easy it was to hack into flight systems. He'd grown up in Detroit, raised by a single mother who worked as a nurse during the day and a waitress at night. Diane Bennett had sacrificed everything so her son could have opportunities she'd never had. Marcus remembered nights when she'd gone without dinner so he could eat, mornings when she'd driven him to school on fumes because payday wasn't until Friday. This trip to London, this interview, this ticket, it was everything. It was the moment when all that sacrifice paid off, when he could finally tell his mother she'd never have to work another double shift, when he could prove that all those years of being told he didn't belong, didn't fit, wasn't good enough, were lies. Now Victoria Ashford was looking at him like he was trash that needed to be taken out, and Marcus felt something inside him start to crack. Victoria stepped closer, her expensive perfume creating an invisible barrier between them. She was tall in her heels, eye level with Marcus invading his personal space with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. "I'm going to need you to be honest with me," she said. Her voice was loud enough to carry through the cabin a performance for the other passengers. "Where did you get that ticket?" Marcus blinked, thrown by the question. "I told you. NextSec Systems sent it to me. I'm interviewing for their cybersecurity team tomorrow." Victoria's laugh was sharp, dismissive. "NextSec. The cybersecurity firm." "Yes. And they sent you a first-class ticket." "Yes." Victoria looked him up and down slowly, deliberately. Her eyes lingered on his hoodie, his jeans, his sneakers. She wanted him to feel examined, catalogued, found wanting. "Sweetheart, I've been flying this route for 15 years. I know the kind of people NextSec sends to London. They wear suits. They carry professional briefcases. They look like they belong in first class." Marcus's jaw tightened. His hands clenched at his sides, phone still gripped in his right palm. "I'm interviewing tomorrow. I dressed for the flight, not the interview. I have a suit in my bag." Victoria held out her hand. "Show me." "What, your ticket confirmation?" "The email. The invoice. Show me everything." Marcus hesitated. His phone was old, the screen cracked from a drop 6 months ago that he couldn't afford to repair. He'd been embarrassed about it when he boarded, worried what people would think. Now he unlocked it with shaking fingers and pulled up his email. Victoria snatched the phone from his hand before he could offer it. She held it away from herself, squinting at the screen like it might be contaminated. Behind Marcus, Ryan Porter leaned against the galley wall, arms crossed over his chest, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "This is good," he thought. "Victoria's handling this perfectly." In seat 2, a Derek Morrison had set down his Financial Times. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and watched the scene with open interest. Finally, someone dealing with this properly, he thought. Amanda Cross in 1B had pulled her Hermes bag onto her lap, holding it like a shield. Her eyes darted between Marcus and Victoria, her expression a mixture of fear and vindication. Victoria scrolled through Marcus's email, her face showing nothing but skepticism. The confirmation was there, legitimate, detailed. Passenger name, Marcus Bennett. Flight 617 Boston to London Heathrow. Seat 1A. Fare $8,400. Purchased by NextSec Systems Limited. But Victoria didn't care what the email said. She'd already decided the truth. "These can be faked," she announced to the cabin. She turned the phone toward Ryan. "Can't they?" Ryan nodded eagerly. "Oh yeah, I've seen it before. People Photoshop confirmations all the time. Think they can just waltz into first class." Marcus felt heat crawling up his neck, flooding his face. That's not fake. Call the company. Call next sec. They'll confirm. Victoria handed the phone back to him, but not gently. She practically tossed it, forcing him to fumble the catch. I'm not calling anyone, she said. What I'm going to do is give you a choice. Marcus's heart was pounding now, adrenaline making his hands shake. You can walk back to economy right now, Victoria continued. No fuss, no drama. We'll forget this happened. Or she paused for effect. Or I can call security, have them verify this ticket themselves, and when they discover it's fraudulent, you'll be arrested for attempting to board with false documentation. That's not. Marcus started, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. That's not going to happen, because my ticket is real. Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then you won't mind if I scan it finally? Marcus held out his phone. Yes, please scan it. Victoria made no move to take it. Instead, she turned to the passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this delay. We're just dealing with a small verification issue. Derek Morrison spoke up from 2A, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being listened to. Ms. Ashford, I appreciate your thoroughness. We can't be too careful these days. Amanda Cross nodded from 1B. I have a connection to make in London. Can we please resolve this quickly? Victoria turned back to Marcus, emboldened by the support. Here's what I think happened, she said, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone could still hear. I think you found someone's email confirmation, maybe in a trash bin at a coffee shop. Maybe you hacked into someone's account. I didn't hack anyone, Marcus protested. Victoria spoke over him. And you thought you'd ride first class for free, thought you'd get away with it. Well, not on my watch. Marcus felt something inside him breaking. This was the guidance counselor in high school telling him MIT was unrealistic. This was the campus security at MIT stopping him twice in his first week, demanding to see his student ID because they didn't believe he was a student. This was every time someone had looked at him and seen a threat instead of a person. Just scan the ticket, Marcus said, and he hated how his voice wavered. Please. Victoria finally reached into her pocket and pulled out a handheld scanner, the kind used to verify boarding passes. She held it up, making a show of it. Fine. When this comes back invalid, you're off my plane. She grabbed Marcus's phone again, rougher this time, and held it under the scanner. The device beeped once, sharp and clear. Then the screen flashed green. The scanner's display showed Bennett Marcus. Seat 1A. Status valid. Boarding confirmed. Victoria stared at the screen. Her carefully composed expression flickered just for a second, showing something underneath. Confusion, then annoyance, then calculation. Ryan stepped closer, peering at the scanner. That can't be right. Victoria tapped the screen as if the device were malfunctioning. She scanned the phone again. Same result. Green. Valid. Confirmed. The cabin had gone silent. Every passenger was watching now, waiting to see what would happen next. Marcus felt a tiny spark of relief. Finally. Proof. Validation. The scanner didn't lie. Can I sit down now? He asked quietly, reaching for his phone. Victoria pulled it back out of his reach. Her eyes had gone cold, calculating. She wasn't defeated. She was just changing tactics. The system must be glitching, she announced to the cabin. She turned to Ryan. Check the main computer in the galley. See if there's an error in the manifest. Ryan hurried to the galley touchscreen, tapping and swiping with exaggerated urgency. After a moment, he frowned. It's showing him as valid here too, Brenda. Victoria's jaw tightened. She looked at Marcus, then at the other passengers, then back at Marcus. Her mind was racing, looking for another angle, another way to maintain control of her domain. Behind the galley curtain, Sofia Martinez watched with growing horror. She knew what was coming next. She'd seen Victoria do this before, finding reasons to deny people, to exclude them, to enforce standards that existed nowhere but in her own mind. Victoria straightened her shoulders, smoothed her uniform, and smiled at Marcus. It was a predator's smile. "Well," she said, her voice taking on a new edge, "even if the ticket is technically valid, we still have standards in this cabin." "What standards?" Marcus asked, his hope beginning to curdle into dread. Victoria looked him up and down again, making sure every passenger saw what she was seeing. "Dress code," she said simply. "First class has a dress code, and you, sweetheart, are in violation." "There is no dress code," Marcus said. His voice was steady, but barely. "I checked the website. I read the terms and conditions. There's no dress code for passengers." Victoria's smile widened. "Oh, there's no official written policy," she agreed. "But there are expectations. Standards of presentation that our first-class guests understand and respect." She gestured around the cabin, inviting the other passengers to join her judgment. "Look around you. Everyone here understands what first class means. It's not just about the seat. It's about the experience, the atmosphere, the level of refinement." Derek Morrison nodded from 2A, emboldened by Victoria's confidence. "She's absolutely right. First class is a privilege, not a right. Even with a valid ticket, there are standards of decorum." Marcus felt his chest tightening. "This can't be happening. This can't be real." "My clothes are clean," he said. "I'm not bothering anyone. I just want to sit in the seat I was assigned." Victoria stepped even closer, her voice dropping to something almost maternal, dripping with false concern. "Honey, I'm sure you don't realize this, but your appearance is making other passengers uncomfortable." She turned to Amanda Cross in 1B. "Ma'am, are you comfortable with this seating arrangement?" Amanda, clutching her Hermes bag, looked at Marcus with barely disguised distaste. "Well, I certainly didn't expect to be seated next to someone so casually dressed. It does affect the ambiance." Marcus felt like he'd been slapped. He looked at Amanda, really looked at her, trying to find some hint of humanity in her eyes. He found none. Victoria turned to Derek in 2A. "Sir, your thoughts?" Derek set down his Financial Times with deliberate care. "I fly first class precisely to avoid this kind of situation. If Atlas Airways is going to allow anyone in athletic wear and hoodies, I'll have to reconsider my loyalty to this airline." The threat hung in the air. Victoria smiled, vindicated. "You see," Victoria said, turning back to Marcus, "you're disrupting the experience for our valued customers. As the senior purser on this flight, I have the authority to reseat passengers when necessary for the comfort and safety of all guests." "This isn't about safety," Marcus said. His hands were shaking now, but his voice was getting stronger. "This is about how I look. About who you think I am." Victoria's expression hardened. "Don't make this about something it's not. This is about maintaining standards." "Then explain the standard," Marcus challenged. "Show me where it says I can't wear a hoodie." Victoria's jaw tightened. She didn't have an answer because there was no answer. There was no policy. There was only her judgment, her gatekeeping, her deeply held belief that certain people belonged in certain spaces and others did not. Ryan saw his moment to be useful. "Hey," he called out from the galley. "I just checked the passenger conduct policy. It says crew members have discretion to reseat passengers who are causing disruption or discomfort to others." He said it with a note of triumph, like he'd found the loophole that would make this all legal, all justified. "I'm not causing disruption," Marcus protested. "I haven't said anything to anyone." I just walked to my seat. "You're arguing with crew," Ryan shot back. "That's disruption right there. Because you won't let me sit down." "Your voice is raised," Victoria observed calmly. "You're becoming agitated. This is exactly the kind of behavior we can't tolerate in first class. Marcus realized the trap he was in. If he stayed calm, they'd find another reason. If he got upset, they'd call him aggressive. There was no winning move. The game was rigged from the start. Thomas Hayes in 2C watched the scene unfold, his lawyer's mind cataloging every word, every action. He pulled out his phone, opened the voice recorder app, and pressed record. He kept the phone low, discreet, but the microphone was picking up everything. James Rivera in 3B leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests so hard his knuckles had gone white. He wanted to say something to stand up to stop this, but he also knew what happened to people like him when they challenged authority. He'd been there before, and it never ended well. So he stayed silent, hating himself for it. Victoria made a show of sighing like this was all very unfortunate but necessary. "Mr. Bennett," she said, using his name for the first time, making it sound like an accusation. "I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and move to the economy cabin." "No," Marcus said. It was the firmest he'd sounded since boarding. "I'm not moving. This is my seat. I have a valid ticket. I haven't broken any rules." Victoria's eyes flashed. "Are you refusing to comply with crew instructions? I'm refusing to be treated like a criminal when I haven't done anything wrong?" Ryan stepped out from the galley, moving to stand beside Victoria, creating a physical wall between Marcus and the first-class seats. "Dude, you need to chill. You're making this way harder than it needs to be." Marcus looked at Ryan, really looked at him, saw the eagerness in his eyes, the desire to impress Victoria, the complete lack of empathy or shame. Ryan actually believed he was doing the right thing. Victoria pulled out her phone, making sure Marcus could see what she was doing. "I'm going to call the captain now. He'll decide whether you stay on this flight at all." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. If they kicked him off this flight, he'd miss his interview. He'd lose this opportunity. Everything his mother had worked for, everything he'd sacrificed for, would evaporate because a flight attendant decided he didn't look right. "Please," Marcus said, and he hated the pleading in his voice. "Please don't do this. This interview. It's everything. My mom, she worked 2 jobs my whole life to get me here. Please." Victoria's expression didn't soften. In fact, it hardened further. "Should have thought of that before you tried to scam your way into first class." "I didn't scam anyone." Marcus's voice rose, frustration and fear overwhelming his attempt to stay calm. Victoria's eyes lit up. She'd been waiting for this. Aggressive behavior, she announced to the cabin. Threatening tone. "This is exactly why we have protocols." She reached for Marcus's backpack. "I'm going to need to search your bag. Make sure there's nothing dangerous." "Don't touch my stuff," Marcus said, pulling his backpack against his chest. Refusing to comply with a security check, Ryan narrated like he was documenting evidence. "This isn't a security check," Marcus protested. "You're just harassing me." Victoria's hand shot out and grabbed the strap of Marcus's backpack. She pulled hard. Marcus pulled back instinctively, trying to keep his belongings. For one terrible second, they were locked in a physical struggle over the backpack right there in the aisle with every first-class passenger watching. Then Victoria let go, suddenly stumbling backward with theatrical grace. She caught herself on the seat back, one hand flying to her chest, her eyes going wide with manufactured shock. "He pushed me," she gasped. "Did everyone see that?" "He physically pushed me. I didn't touch you." Marcus's voice cracked with desperation. "You grabbed my bag and I pulled back. I never touched you." Ryan was already moving. "I saw it. He assaulted a crew member." "That's a federal offense." Amanda Cross gasped, pressing herself against the window as if Marcus were a wild animal about to attack. "Oh my God, he's violent." Derek Morrison stood up from 2A, his face flushed with righteous anger. "Young man, you need to get off this plane immediately. You're a danger to everyone here." Marcus looked around wildly, seeing the trap closing around him. He hadn't touched Victoria. He knew he hadn't. but her hand was still pressed to her chest, her face showing pain, and Ryan was backing up her story, and the passengers were nodding, confirming a lie that was becoming truth through repetition. Sofia Martinez stood frozen behind the galley curtain, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She knew Marcus hadn't touched Victoria. She'd seen the whole thing, but if she spoke up now, if she contradicted Victoria's story, her career was over. So she said nothing, and the lie grew stronger. Victoria straightened her uniform, smoothing the fabric with shaking hands that weren't really shaking. Her performance was flawless. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of fear and pity that would have been convincing if it weren't so calculated. "Ryan," she said, her voice wavering just slightly. "Call the captain. Tell him we have a security situation in the first-class cabin. Possible assault on crew. Request airport security to meet the aircraft." Ryan pulled out the crew phone with eager efficiency. "On it." Marcus felt the world tilting beneath him. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. 2 minutes ago, he'd been trying to take his seat. Now he was being accused of assault, threatened with arrest, about to lose everything because a flight attendant decided he didn't belong. "Please," he said again, and he could hear the desperation in his own voice, could feel tears burning behind his eyes. "Please, I didn't touch her. I swear to God I didn't touch her." Victoria took a step back as if she were afraid of him. "I know you're upset," she said, her voice gentle now, understanding the voice of a victim trying to de-escalate her attacker. "But you need to calm down before you make this worse." "How can I make this worse?" Marcus's voice broke. "You're calling the cops on me for something I didn't do. My interview is tomorrow morning. If I miss this flight, I lose everything." Victoria's expression didn't change. "You should have thought of that before." Before what? Marcus wanted to scream. Before existing while black, before wearing comfortable clothes, before thinking I had the right to sit in a seat I paid for. But he didn't say any of that. He just stood there, backpack clutched to his chest, phone still in his hand, showing a boarding pass that apparently meant nothing. Derek Morrison stepped into the aisle, his tall frame adding physical intimidation to the scene. "Young man, I suggest you comply with Ms. Ashford's instructions. The longer you resist, the worse this will be for you." Thomas Hayes in 2C spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but clear. "Mr. Morrison, I think you should sit down." Derek turned, surprised. "Excuse me. Sit down. You're not helping." Derek's face flushed red. "I'm trying to ensure the safety of this cabin." Thomas's eyes were steady behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "I've been recording this entire interaction. I suggest everyone be very careful about what they say and do next." The cabin went silent. Victoria's eyes darted to Thomas, calculating this new threat. "You can't record on an aircraft without permission." "Actually," Thomas said mildly, "as an attorney, I'm well aware of the law. And in Massachusetts, only one party needs to consent to recording. I'm that party. Everything that's happened here is documented." Victoria's jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. "Then you've recorded Mr. Bennett assaulting me. Thank you for the evidence. I've recorded you grabbing his bag and then claiming he pushed you when he clearly did no such thing." Amanda Cross leaned forward from 1B. "I saw him push her." Thomas looked at her directly. "Ma'am, I would be very careful about making false statements. Perjury is a crime." Amanda shrank back into her seat. James Rivera finally found his voice from 3B. He didn't touch her. "I saw the whole thing." She grabbed his bag, he pulled back, and she let go and stumbled on purpose. Ryan turned on James. "You're interfering with crew operations. I can have you removed too." James stood up, his architect's build suddenly imposing. "Try it." The cabin was crackling with tension now, passengers choosing sides, the situation spiraling beyond Victoria's control. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Marcus was supposed to slink away in shame. Instead, witnesses were speaking up, recordings existed, and her narrative was crumbling. But Victoria had been doing this too long to fold now. She reached for Marcus's arm. "Sir, I need you to come with me. We're going to wait in the galley for security to arrive." Marcus jerked his arm back. "Don't touch me." Refusing to comply again, Ryan documented continued aggression. Sophia couldn't take it anymore. She stepped out from behind the galley curtain, her voice shaking but determined. "Victoria, his ticket is valid. I checked the manifest. He's supposed to be in 1A. This isn't right." Victoria's head snapped toward Sophia. Her eyes were ice. "Ms. Martinez, get back to your station. Now." Sophia took a breath. "No." "What did you just say to me? I said no." "This passenger has done nothing wrong. His ticket is legitimate. He hasn't touched you. He hasn't threatened anyone. We're harassing him and it's wrong." Victoria's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're suspended, effective immediately. Get off my aircraft." "You can't suspend her," Thomas interjected. "You're a purser, not a supervisor. You don't have that authority." Victoria's carefully maintained composure was starting to crack. "Every one of you needs to sit down and be quiet, or you're all off this plane." That's when Marcus made his decision. He couldn't win this fight. Not here, not now, not against Victoria's authority and the passenger's prejudice and the weight of every assumption that had been made about him since birth. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll go." He picked up his backpack, slinging it over his shoulder. His eyes were wet, but he wouldn't let the tears fall. Not here. Not in front of them. Victoria's smile of triumph was brief but unmistakable. Marcus took one step toward the exit. His shoulders slumped under the weight of defeat. This was it. The end of the dream. His mother's face flashed in his mind, the pride in her eyes when he'd told her about the interview, about the ticket, about the chance to finally pay her back for everything she'd done. "Sorry, Mom," he thought. "I tried." He took another step. Then a voice cut through the cabin like a knife through butter, deep and commanding and absolutely certain. "Stop this immediately!" The voice came from the jet bridge, reverberating through the aircraft with the kind of authority that made everyone freeze mid-breath. It wasn't loud, didn't need to be loud, because it carried the weight of absolute certainty. Marcus stopped mid-step. Victoria's triumphant smile faltered. Every passenger turned toward the entrance. A man stepped through the aircraft door, and the air itself seemed to shift to accommodate him. Leonard Maxwell was 58 years old and looked like he'd been carved from granite by someone who understood power. He stood 6'3", broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than a used car. His hair was silver, perfectly styled, swept back from a face that could have belonged to a senator or a CEO or a man who owned both. His eyes were steel gray sharp and assessing missing nothing. Behind him, two assistants flanked the doorway, young men in dark suits carrying tablets and leather portfolios. Behind them, a nervous gate agent hovered, clearly unsure what was happening, but knowing it was significant. Maxwell's shoes were Italian leather, clicking purposefully on the aircraft floor as he stepped fully into the first-class cabin. His cologne was subtle, expensive cedar and leather. He wore a simple platinum wedding band on his left hand, no other jewelry. He didn't need accessories to command attention. He looked at the scene before him. Marcus frozen in the aisle with his backpack positioned to leave. Victoria, standing rigid hand still outstretched from her last gesture. Ryan by the galley crew phone still in hand. Sophia pressed against the wall, tears on her cheeks. The passengers in their seats watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to guilt to anticipation. Maxwell's gaze swept over all of them, cataloging, assessing, understanding in seconds what had transpired. "I asked you to stop," he said, his voice quiet now, but no less commanding. His eyes fixed on Victoria. "What is happening on my aircraft?" Victoria's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock recognition, fear, then a desperate attempt to regain composure. Her hand flew to her hair, checking that every strand was in place. Her other hand smoothed her uniform. "Mr. Maxwell," she stammered. "Sir, we didn't know you were on this flight." "The manifest didn't show. I booked late," Maxwell interrupted. "That's irrelevant." He stepped closer, his presence filling the cabin. "What is relevant is why there's a passenger standing in the aisle with his luggage looking like he's about to be thrown off my plane." Ryan stepped forward, eager to explain to salvage the situation. "Sir, we have a security concern." This individual has been Maxwell's head turned toward Ryan, and the look in his eyes made the younger man's words die in his throat. "This individual has a name, I presume?" Maxwell's voice was dangerously soft. Ryan swallowed hard. Yes, sir, but we haven't." "Then use it," Maxwell said. Ryan's face flushed red. He opened his mouth, closed it again, looked helplessly at Victoria. Derek Morrison, emboldened by his usual authority in business settings, stood up from 2A. "Mr. Maxwell, I'm Derek Morrison, senior partner at Blackstone Mercer. Perhaps I can clarify the situation. This young man has been aggressive toward your staff." Maxwell didn't even glance at him. "Sit down, Mr. Morrison." Derek blinked, taken aback. "With respect, sir, I think I said—" "Sit down," Maxwell repeated, and his voice dropped to something that made Derek's spine straighten involuntarily. Derek sat. The cabin was absolutely silent now. Even the ambient noise of the auxiliary power unit seemed muted. Maxwell commanded the space completely, and everyone in it knew they were witnessing something rare and dangerous absolute authority wielded without hesitation. Maxwell turned his full attention to Marcus. The young man was still frozen backpack on his shoulder, eyes wide with confusion and fading hope. "What's your name?" Maxwell asked, and his voice had changed completely. It was gentle now, respectful. "Marcus, sir." "Marcus Bennett." Maxwell extended his hand. The gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to everything that had just happened, that Marcus almost didn't respond. Then he shifted his backpack and shook Maxwell's hand. The grip was firm, warm, human. "Mr. Bennett," Maxwell said, "I apologize for whatever has transpired here. Can you tell me what's happening?" Marcus's throat felt tight. He started, then stopped. He looked at Victoria, who was watching with barely concealed dread. "They said my ticket was fake, that I didn't belong in first class, that I was—" his voice wavered, "that I was making people uncomfortable." Maxwell's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He turned to Victoria. "Is this true?" Victoria straightened her shoulders, trying to recover her authority. "Mr. Maxwell, sir, there were legitimate concerns about the validity of his boarding pass. And when I attempted to verify—" "Did you scan his boarding pass?" Maxwell interrupted. Victoria hesitated. "I did, sir. It showed valid, but what?" "But the system can be manipulated. I've seen cases where—" "So his ticket was valid." Maxwell's words were statements, not questions. "Technically, yes, but—" "Then why was he being removed?" Victoria's carefully constructed justifications were crumbling, but she grasped for her last defense. "Standards, sir. First-class standards. His attire was inappropriate for the cabin. He was dressed in athletic wear, and it was creating discomfort among our other guests." Maxwell's eyes swept over Marcus, taking in the MIT hoodie, the worn jeans, the scuffed Jordans. Then his gaze moved to Victoria's tailored uniform, her expensive watch, her perfect makeup. "I'm wearing a suit," Maxwell said quietly, "because I came from a board meeting. Does Mr. Bennett's interview attire dictate his right to the seat he purchased?" "He didn't purchase it, sir. He claims a company bought it for him, which seemed suspicious given what Maxwell's voice had dropped to something dangerous again." Victoria faltered. "Given the circumstances." Explain the circumstances. Victoria looked around the cabin, seeking support, finding none. Her voice was smaller now. He didn't fit the typical profile of our first-class passengers. Profile, Maxwell repeated. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Explain what you mean by that, Ms. Ashford. Victoria's face had gone pale. Our first-class cabin maintains certain standards. Dress code, demeanor, presentation. It's about the experience for all our guests. She gestured weakly at Marcus. He's wearing a hoodie and sneakers. Our typical first-class travelers dress professionally. Maxwell took a step closer to Victoria. His voice remained quiet, but every word was precise cutting. I'm wearing a suit because I came from a board meeting. Mr. Bennett is interviewing tomorrow. Does his comfort on an overnight flight negate his right to the seat his company purchased? Victoria had no answer. Maxwell turned to Marcus. What company are you interviewing with Mr. Bennett NextSec Systems, sir? In London. Cybersecurity position. Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly. NextSec, excellent firm. I know their CEO. He looked back at Victoria. Did you ask to see Mr. Bennett's documentation? The email confirmation? The invoice. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. No, sir. Why not? Because Victoria struggled to find words that wouldn't damn her. Because given the circumstances, I thought, you thought a young black man in casual clothing couldn't possibly have a legitimate first-class ticket. Maxwell finished for her. I never said anything about race, Victoria protested weakly. You didn't have to, Maxwell said. Your actions spoke clearly enough. Derek Morrison, despite Maxwell's earlier warning, couldn't help himself. He stood again, his face flushed with indignation. Now wait just a minute. That's a very serious accusation. Ms. Ashford was simply maintaining standards. There's nothing racial about Maxwell finally looked at Derek directly, and the banker's words evaporated. Mr. Morrison, you were warned once. Don't make me remove you as well. Remove me, Derek sputtered. I'm a senior partner at... I know who you are, Maxwell interrupted. I also know you sit on my airline's corporate advisory board. Or rather you did. Consider that position terminated effective immediately. Derek's face went white. The corporate advisory position was prestigious, lucrative, a key networking opportunity. You can't, he started. I just did, Maxwell said simply. Now sit down and be quiet, or join Mr. Bennett in leaving this aircraft, though in your case it will be permanent. Derek sat down so fast he nearly missed the seat. Maxwell turned to the rest of the cabin, addressing them as a group. Let me be very clear about something. I am Leonard Maxwell. I founded Atlas Airways 32 years ago with one plane and a dream of building an airline that valued every passenger equally. That's not just marketing. That's a principle I've built this company on. His eyes moved from passenger to passenger, making contact, holding it. Some looked away. Others tried to maintain eye contact and failed. What I've witnessed here today is a betrayal of everything I've worked to create. A passenger with a valid ticket seated in the cabin he paid for being harassed and humiliated based on nothing more than his appearance. Amanda Cross in 1B shifted uncomfortably, her Hermes bag clutched tightly to her chest. Maxwell continued, and worse than that, he was supported in this harassment by passengers who should have known better, who saw injustice happening, and not only remained silent but actively participated. He looked at Derek. You told Ms. Ashford that Mr. Bennett's appearance made you uncomfortable, that he didn't belong here. Derek opened his mouth, closed it again. His face was scarlet. Maxwell looked at Amanda. You demanded he be removed because you had a connection to make. Amanda stared at her lap, unable to meet his eyes. Maxwell's gaze swept the cabin one more time. Every one of you who sat here and watched this happen, who didn't speak up, who let this young man be degraded and threatened with arrest, you're complicit. You're part of the problem." The silence was crushing. Then Maxwell turned to Sophia Martinez, who was still pressed against the galley wall, tears streaming down her face. "You," he said, not unkindly. "Junior attendant." "What's your name?" Sophia's voice was hoarse. "Sophia Martinez, sir. Did you see what happened here?" Sophia looked at Victoria, whose eyes were pleading warning, threatening all at once. Then she looked at Marcus, who had been silent through all of this, who was still standing with his backpack like he couldn't quite believe he wasn't being thrown off the plane. Sophia took a breath and made her choice. "Yes, sir. I saw everything." "Tell me." Sophia's voice shook at first, then grew stronger. "I checked the manifest when Mr. Bennett boarded. His ticket is valid. Full-fare business recruitment package. I tried to tell Victoria, but she told me to stay out of it. She said she knew what she was doing." Victoria's face crumpled. "Sophia, you don't understand. I understand perfectly." Sophia interrupted, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. "I understand that you profiled this passenger the moment you saw him. I understand that you refused to scan his ticket fairly. I understand that you grabbed his bag and then claimed he assaulted you when he pulled away." Sophia's hands were shaking, but she kept going. "I understand that I've watched you do this before to other passengers who didn't fit your idea of what first class should look like, and I understand that I should have spoken up sooner." She looked at Marcus. "I'm sorry. I needed this job and I was afraid. But that's not an excuse. I'm sorry." Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Maxwell pulled out his phone, opened the Atlas Airways employee app. "Mr. Bennett, may I see your phone?" Marcus handed it over without hesitation. Maxwell scanned the QR code on Marcus's boarding pass. His phone chimed and he turned the screen so Victoria could see it. "Bennett Marcus, Seat 1A, valid. Booked by NextSec Systems. Full business class fare $8,400. He let that number hang in the air for a moment. $8,400. More than your monthly salary, I'd wager, Ms. Ashford. Victoria said nothing. There was nothing to say. "And you were going to throw him off the plane." Maxwell continued, his voice quiet but lethal for not fitting your profile. Thomas Hayes stood up from 2C, his lawyer's instincts telling him this was the moment to act. "Mr. Maxwell, my name is Thomas Hayes. I'm an attorney with Morrison and Duke." He held up his phone. "I've been recording audio from the moment Mr. Bennett stepped into this cabin. Everything Miss Ashford said, everything, Mr. Porter did everything the other passengers contributed. All documented." Maxwell nodded. "Send it to our legal department. And thank you for speaking up." James Rivera stood from 3B, his face tight with controlled anger. "I saw it too, sir. All of it. That young man didn't do anything wrong. He was calm the whole time. Your staff profiled him, harassed him, and then lied about him being aggressive." Rivera's voice was thick with emotion. "I've been on the receiving end of this before. I know it when I see it. And this was wrong from start to finish." Maxwell extended his hand to Rivera. "Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Your integrity is noted and appreciated." They shook hands, a moment of solidarity between strangers united by principle. Maxwell turned back to Victoria. "The evidence is overwhelming, Ms. Ashford. Multiple witnesses, audio recording, your own admission that his ticket was valid. What do you have to say for yourself?" Victoria's eyes were wet, now mascara starting to smudge. She'd maintained her composure through everything else, but now faced with the absolute certainty of consequences, she was breaking. "Mr. Maxwell, please." "I've been with Atlas Airways for 15 years. I've never had a complaint. I was doing what I thought was right for the airline. I was protecting the brand, maintaining standards." "You were protecting your prejudice," Maxwell corrected. There's a difference. Victoria's voice cracked. I have a mortgage. I have bills. I'm 3 years from my pension vesting. Please, sir, give me another chance. Did you give Mr. Bennett a chance? Maxwell asked quietly. When he showed you his valid ticket, did you give him the benefit of the doubt? When he told you about his interview, did you listen? When he asked you to simply let him sit in the seat he paid for, did you show him any mercy? Victoria couldn't answer because the answer was no, to all of it. Maxwell turned to Ryan Porter, who had been trying to make himself invisible near the galley. Mr. Porter, what's your role in this? Ryan's voice was thin, desperate. Sir, I was just following Victoria's lead. She's the senior purser. I'm new. I thought she knew what she was doing. You thought you'd pile on, Maxwell said. Make yourself look good by putting someone else down. Is that accurate? Ryan's face was ashen. I just... Yes or no, Mr. Porter? Ryan's shoulders slumped. Yes, sir. At least you're honest, Maxwell said, though that doesn't excuse your actions. He turned to Marcus, who had been silent through all of this, watching his vindication unfold in real time, but still looking like he couldn't quite believe it was happening. Mr. Bennett, Maxwell said gently, I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything, Sir Marcus said. His voice was hoarse from holding back tears. You already stopped this. That's more than anyone else has ever done. Maxwell smiled, but it was sad. I'm not just another passenger, Mr. Bennett. I'm the founder and chairman of this airline. This is my company. And what happened to you here today is a profound failure of everything I've tried to build. Marcus's eyes widened. You're the chairman, I am. And 3 weeks ago, my VP of Technology called me about a potential partnership with NextSec Systems, Shared Aviation Cybersecurity Initiative. They wanted to know if we'd be willing to provide data for a test case. Marcus felt his heart rate quickening. Maxwell continued. NextSec mentioned they'd just recruited a brilliant young MIT graduate who'd written a thesis on airline system vulnerabilities. They asked if I'd be interested in reading it. Marcus's breath caught. You read my thesis? All 200 pages, Maxwell confirmed. Your analysis of how airport manifest systems can be compromised was exceptional. Thorough, innovative, and frankly a little terrifying in how easily you identified vulnerabilities in our systems that our own security teams had missed. The cabin was silent, every passenger hanging on Maxwell's words. I'm on this flight specifically to meet you, Mr. Bennett. I wanted to offer you a position at Atlas Airways, heading our new cybersecurity division, a counteroffer to NextSec. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. What I was going to approach you after takeoff. Have a quiet conversation over dinner service. Offer you a job that would change your life. Maxwell's voice hardened as he looked at Victoria. Instead, I arrived to find my staff humiliating you, my passengers attacking you, and you being thrown off the plane for not fitting the profile. The full weight of what Victoria had done was settling over the cabin like a cloud. She hadn't just harassed a random passenger, she'd almost cost the airline a major talent acquisition. She'd humiliated someone the chairman personally wanted to hire. Her career wasn't just over, it was destroyed. The realization of what they'd almost done was spreading through the first-class cabin like a virus. Derek Morrison looked sick, his earlier confidence evaporated. Amanda Cross had her hand over her mouth, her expensive rings catching the light as she processed that she'd just demanded the removal of someone the chairman of the airline had personally flown across the country to recruit. But it was Victoria who looked truly devastated. Her 15 years of service, her authority, her carefully maintained control of her domain, all of it collapsing in real time. She gripped the seat back beside her, her knuckles white. Thomas Hayes stepped forward, his phone still in hand. Mr. Maxwell, I want to ensure this recording reaches the proper channels. What Miss Ashford did here constitutes harassment at minimum, possibly discrimination under federal law. Maxwell nodded. Our legal department will review it thoroughly. Thank you for your diligence." Hayes looked at Marcus. "Mr. Bennett, I handle employment discrimination cases. If you decide to pursue legal action beyond what the airline does internally, my firm would take your case pro bono. What happened here was unconscionable." Marcus was still trying to process everything. "I thank you. I just want to get to my interview." "You'll get there," Maxwell assured him. "And you'll do it in the seat you were assigned, with our deepest apologies." James Rivera spoke up from 3B, his voice carrying the weight of shared experience. "Mr. Bennett, I'm an architect. I have an office in London. If you need anything during your time there, references, connections, anything, here's my card." He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to Marcus. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Connection, solidarity, recognition. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice thick. "Really, thank you." A woman in seat 4A, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, raised her hand tentatively. "Mr. Maxwell, I'd like to apologize. I saw what was happening and I didn't say anything. I should have spoken up." "Yes," Maxwell said simply. "You should have." The woman flushed but nodded, accepting the judgment. A man in 3C cleared his throat. "I felt uncomfortable watching it. It seemed wrong. But I didn't know if it was my place to interfere." "It's always your place to stand against injustice," Maxwell said. "That's not about interfering. That's about being human." More passengers were shifting now, some looking guilty, some defensive, all of them recalculating their complicity. Amanda Cross finally found her voice, thin and shaky. "Mr. Maxwell?" I spoke hastily. "I said things I shouldn't have. I apologize to Mr. Bennett." Maxwell looked at her with something close to contempt. "Miss Cross, you demanded this young man be removed because you had a connection to make, as if your flight to London was more important than his dignity." Amanda's hands trembled. I didn't understand the situation." "You understood perfectly," Maxwell corrected. "You saw a young black man in casual clothes and assumed he didn't belong, just like Ms. Ashford did, just like Mr. Morrison did. The only difference is that you don't work for me, so I can't fire you." He paused, letting that sink in. "But I can revoke your VIP status. Your Platinum Elite membership in our rewards program is terminated effective immediately." Amanda's face went white. "I've been Platinum Elite for 8 years, and in 8 seconds you helped destroy a young man's dignity. Actions have consequences, Ms. Cross." Derek Morrison, sensing the hammer was about to fall on him as well, tried one last defense. "Mr. Maxwell, with respect, I was simply trying to help Miss Ashford maintain order. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what?" Maxwell interrupted. "That the person you were mocking might be someone of value. Does that mean, if Mr. Bennett had been wearing a suit, you would have treated him with respect? Or does he only deserve dignity if he's important?" Derek had no answer. Maxwell continued. "You told Ms. Ashford that NextSec would never send a candidate in coach attire. You made assumptions based on Mr. Bennett's appearance and used your supposed knowledge of the industry to validate discrimination." "I was wrong," Derek admitted quietly. "Yes," Maxwell agreed. "You were. And as I mentioned earlier, your position on our corporate advisory board is terminated. Additionally, you are banned from flying Atlas Airways. Lifetime ban. You'll receive official notice within 24 hours. Derek stood abruptly. "You can't do that. I fly Atlas for business. My firm has a corporate contract," had Maxwell corrected. "I'll be contacting Blackstone Mercer this afternoon to inform them why one of their senior partners is no longer welcome on my aircraft, and to renegotiate our corporate terms without your inclusion." The color drained from Derek's face. He realized what this meant. His managing partners would demand an explanation. They'd want to know why their Atlas contract was being restructured because of his behavior. This would follow him, stain his reputation, possibly cost him his partnership. "Mr. Maxwell, please." "Can we discuss this privately?" "No," Maxwell said flatly. "You humiliated Mr. Bennett publicly. You'll face consequences publicly." Derek sank back into his seat, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume, his Rolex meaningless, his authority completely stripped away. Maxwell turned to Sophia Martinez, who was still crying quietly by the galley. "Ms. Martinez, you showed integrity in an impossible situation." Sophia wiped her eyes. "I should have spoken up sooner. I knew it was wrong from the beginning. But you spoke up when it mattered," Maxwell said. "That takes courage." "Effective immediately, you're promoted to senior flight attendant with a 30% salary increase." Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me rebuild a culture of respect on this airline. Say you'll be the voice that speaks up when others stay silent." Sophia nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I will. I promise." Maxwell looked at Ryan Porter. "Mr. Porter, you're suspended pending full investigation. If Miss Martinez's account is verified, which I have no doubt it will be, you'll be terminated for cause." Ryan opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. There was nothing to say. He'd made his choices, and now he'd live with them. Maxwell addressed the entire cabin one last time. "Let this be a lesson to everyone here. You judged Mr. Bennett by his hoodie and his sneakers. You saw a young black man and assumed the worst." His voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the cabin. You didn't see his MIT education. You didn't see his brilliant mind. You didn't see his potential. You saw what you wanted to see. And you were all wrong. He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I'm ashamed that this happened on my airline, but I'm grateful it happened while I was here to stop it, because this is exactly the kind of culture I've spent 3 decades trying to prevent." Maxwell looked at Victoria one last time. She was crying openly now, mascara streaming down her face, her perfect appearance finally cracked. "Ms. Ashford, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you off this aircraft. Your final paycheck will be processed within 48 hours. Your benefits end today, and I will personally ensure that every airline in the industry knows why you were terminated." Victoria collapsed into the jump seat, sobbing. "My pension, my life." "You did this to yourself," Maxwell said coldly. "Now get off my plane." 2 gate agents appeared at the aircraft door, summoned by Maxwell's assistants. They approached Victoria with professional courtesy but firm efficiency. Victoria stood on shaking legs, her dignity in tatters. As she walked down the aisle toward the exit, she couldn't look at Marcus. The shame was too great, the reality too crushing. When the cabin door closed behind her, sealing out her sobs, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as if something poisonous had been removed. Maxwell turned to Marcus with a gentle smile. "Mr. Bennett, shall we sit down and discuss your future?" Maxwell gestured to seat 1A. "Please, Mr. Bennett, that's your seat." Marcus moved as if in a dream, sliding his backpack into the overhead bin with shaking hands. He sank into the ivory leather seat, and it felt surreal. 5 minutes ago, he'd been about to walk off this plane in defeat. Now he was sitting where he belonged, with the chairman of the airline settling into the seat directly behind him. Derek Morrison had been moved to economy by a gate agent escorted away with the same efficiency that had removed Victoria. His 3-piece suit and Rolex had meant nothing in the end. Seat 2A was empty now, a physical reminder of consequences. Marcus buckled his seatbelt, his hands still trembling. He looked around the cabin. The other passengers were carefully avoiding eye contact, suddenly very interested in their phones, their magazines, anything but acknowledging their part in what had happened. Only Sophia Martinez met his eyes. She was at the galley, tears still on her cheeks, and she mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." Marcus nodded. He understood. She'd been caught in an impossible situation, and she'd found her courage when it counted. That was more than most people did. Maxwell leaned forward between the seats, his voice low enough for privacy, but clear. "I meant what I said, Mr. Bennett. I want you to run our cybersecurity division." Marcus turned in his seat to face him. "Sir, I'm 22. I graduated 3 months ago. I've never managed anyone, never run a department, never—" "Age is irrelevant," Maxwell interrupted gently. "Ability is everything. You wrote a 200-page thesis that identified vulnerabilities in airline systems that our entire security team missed. You understand the landscape, the threats, the solutions. That's what I need." Marcus's throat was tight. "What about NexSec? I gave them my word I'd interview." Maxwell smiled. "I respect that. Do the interview. If they make you a better offer, come back to me. We'll match it." Why, Marcus asked. "Why me?" "Because talent like yours doesn't come along often," Maxwell said. "And because I'm tired of watching brilliant people be underestimated because of how they look." He leaned back slightly, his expression shifting to something more personal. "You want to know why I reacted so strongly back there?" Marcus nodded. "My father was a mechanic," Maxwell said. "Jamaican immigrant. Worked on planes at JFK in the 1970s. Marcus was surprised. "I didn't know. Most people don't. I don't advertise it." Maxwell's voice carried old pain. "But I remember going to the airport as a kid watching my father work. He was brilliant, could diagnose engine problems by sound alone. He prevented crashes, saved lives." Marcus listened, understanding where this was going. But the pilots, the executives, the passengers, they looked right through him. His coveralls marked him as invisible. His accent marked him as less than. His skin marked him as someone who didn't matter. Maxwell's jaw tightened. "He died of a heart attack when I was 16. Worked himself to death for an airline that never saw his value. When I started Atlas Airways, I swore I'd build something different, where ability mattered more than appearance, where everyone was seen. Today I failed," he said quietly. "Victoria Ashford doesn't represent the culture I tried to build, but she was part of it. That's on me." "You couldn't have known," Marcus started. "I could have done better," Maxwell insisted. "Should have done better. Regular audits, better training, stronger oversight." I got comfortable. Assumed the culture would sustain itself. It didn't. He looked at Marcus directly. "You helped me see that. And I will do better." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This man, this billionaire chairman, was taking responsibility, not making excuses, not blaming Victoria alone, actually acknowledging failure and promising change. "Can I ask you something, sir?" Marcus said. "Anything." "My mom works 2 jobs, nurse during the day, waitress at night. Has been for 6 years, putting me through school even with my scholarship." Maxwell listened without interrupting. "If I take this job," Marcus continued, his voice cracking slightly, "I want to pay off her house. Make sure she never has to work that hard again. Is that something I could do?" Maxwell's expression softened. "Mr. Bennett, if you take this job, your signing bonus alone will cover your mother's mortgage. I'll make sure of it." Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes. He blinked them back. "Thank you." The details, Maxwell said, shifting to business mode. Starting salary $180,000. Stock options that vest over 4 years. Full benefits including health, dental, and vision. Housing assistance in whichever city you choose as your base. New York, London, or San Francisco. Marcus's head was spinning. $180,000. more money than his mother had made in the last 3 years combined. "You're worth more," Maxwell continued. "But we'll get there. I believe in merit-based progression. Show me results and I'll show you compensation that reflects your value." "I need to do the next sec interview," Marcus said again. It felt important to maintain that integrity even now. "I know," Maxwell said, "and I respect it. Do the interview. Take their offer if it's better, but know that my door is open." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the magnitude of what had happened settling over them both. Marcus thought about the last 30 minutes. The humiliation, the accusations, the feeling of being stripped of dignity in front of strangers. Then Maxwell's voice cutting through it all, stopping it immediately, reversing it completely. "Most people don't get a Leonard Maxwell," Marcus said quietly. "Most people just get thrown off the plane." Maxwell's face darkened. "I know. And that's the tragedy. How many brilliant minds are we losing because there's no one to stop the Victoria Ashfords of the world?" He pulled out his phone, made a note to himself. "I'm implementing mandatory bias training across all staff, monthly audits of passenger complaints, anonymous reporting system for crew members who witness discrimination. This won't happen again. Not on my airline." Marcus watched him work, saw the genuine commitment, and felt something he hadn't expected to feel hope. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We apologize for the delay. We've had a crew change and will be pushing back shortly. Flight time to London Heathrow is 7 hours and 20 minutes. Weather looks clear. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." New crew members were boarding now, efficient and professional. A new purser, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, approached Maxwell and Marcus. "Mr. Maxwell, sir. I'm Helen Torres, senior purser. I'll be taking over this flight. We're ready for departure at your discretion." "Thank you," Helen Maxwell said. "And Helen, take special care of Mr. Bennett here. He's had a difficult boarding experience." Helen looked at Marcus and her expression showed genuine warmth. "Mr. Bennett, I apologize on behalf of Atlas Airways for whatever happened before I arrived. You'll have excellent service from here forward. That's a promise." "Thank you," Marcus said. As Helen moved away to prepare the cabin for departure, Maxwell stood and extended his hand to Marcus one more time. "Welcome to Atlas Airways, Mr. Bennett. Or welcome to NextSec. Either way, I have a feeling we'll be working together." They shook hands, and Marcus felt the weight of possibility settling over him. His life had changed in the last hour. Completely, irrevocably changed. The plane began to push back from the gate. Marcus looked out the window at the Boston terminal, at the city where he'd grown up feeling invisible, and felt something like vindication. He belonged here. Not because Maxwell said so, not because his ticket was valid, but because his mind, his work, his dignity were undeniable. And no one would ever take that from him again. As the plane taxied toward the runway, the cabin settled into the familiar pre-flight routine. Flight attendants demonstrated safety procedures. Passengers secured their belongings. The lights dimmed slightly. Marcus sat in 1A, the seat he'd fought for, and felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him shaky and exhausted. His hands trembled as he gripped the armrests. Sophia approached with a warm towel on a silver tray. "Mr. Bennett, can I get you anything before we take off?" Marcus looked up at her. "Water, please." "And Sophia?" She turned back, waiting. "Thank you," Marcus said, "for speaking up. I know it cost you something." Sophia's eyes filled with tears again. "It should have cost me more. I should have done it sooner. You did it when it mattered. That's what counts." She nodded and went to get his water. Thomas Hayes leaned forward from 2C. "Mr. Bennett, I meant what I said about representation. If you need anything at all, contact my office. I appreciate it, Marcus said. Really. James Rivera stood and came forward, settling into the empty seat, 2A. Mind if I join you for a moment? Please, Marcus said. Rivera extended his hand. James Rivera. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Marcus shook his hand. You spoke up when it counted. Same as Sophia. Rivera's jaw tightened. I've been where you were. Not exactly the same, but close enough. 10 years ago, I was on a flight to Dubai for a major architecture conference. Business class. I had a ticket same as you. He paused, remembering. The flight attendant assumed I was in the wrong seat. Thought I was trying to sneak up from economy. Made me show my passport, my credit card, my conference invitation. Even then, she seated me in the very back row of business class away from everyone else. Marcus felt the familiar ache of recognition. I didn't fight it. Rivera continued. I just took the seat and stayed quiet. Told myself it wasn't worth the trouble. He looked at Marcus directly. But watching you stand your ground, maintain your dignity, even when everyone was against you, that took real courage. I didn't feel courageous, Marcus admitted. I felt terrified. Courage isn't not being scared, Rivera said. It's being scared and standing up anyway. They sat in silence for a moment, two men from different generations connected by shared experience. Can I tell you something? Marcus asked. Of course. This isn't the first time this has happened to me. Won't be the last. Rivera nodded. I know. At MIT, Marcus continued. Campus security stopped me twice in my first week. Asked to see my student ID because they didn't believe I was enrolled. I showed them my ID, my acceptance letter, my dorm assignment. They still looked at me like I was lying. His voice was quiet, but steady. I've been followed in stores since I was 12. Had police stop me for fitting a description more times than I can count. Been told I don't look like I belong in advanced classes, honors programs, gifted schools. Rivera's face was tight with controlled anger. So when Victoria looked at me and saw a threat, Marcus continued. Saw someone who didn't belong. Saw a criminal that wasn't new. That was just Tuesday. Then why did you fight it? Rivera asked. Why not just take the easy route and move to economy? Marcus thought about that. Because my mom didn't work 2 jobs for 20 years, so I could accept being treated like I don't matter. Because I earned my MIT degree, and nobody gets to tell me it doesn't count. Because if I don't stand up for myself, who will? He looked at Rivera. And because I'm tired. So tired of making myself small so other people feel comfortable. Tired of apologizing for existing in spaces I have every right to be in. Tired of proving my humanity over and over again. I understand, Rivera said quietly. Marcus continued, the words flowing now. You want to know what the worst part is? It's not the Victoria Ashfords of the world. They're obvious. You can see them coming. What's the worst part? Rivera asked. The worst part is people like Derek Morrison. People who have power, who are educated, who should know better. Who participate in your degradation because it's easier than speaking up. Who watch injustice happen and choose comfort over courage. Marcus's voice was thick with emotion now. The worst part is the silent ones. The passengers who saw what was happening and said nothing. Who let me be humiliated? Because it wasn't their problem. The silence in that space around them was heavy. Then Maxwell's voice cut through it from behind them. That changes now. Both Marcus and Rivera turned. Maxwell had been listening the whole time. Mr. Bennett Maxwell said what you just described is exactly why I reacted the way I did. Because silence is complicity. Because watching injustice and doing nothing makes you part of the problem. He leaned forward. I couldn't stop what happened to you at MIT. I couldn't stop the police from profiling you. I couldn't stop the 1,000 small indignities you've faced in your life, but I could stop this. And I did. Thank you, Marcus said, and he meant it with everything in him. Don't thank me, Maxwell said. Use it. Use this moment. Use your platform. Use your brilliant mind to make sure the next young person who walks onto a plane in a hoodie doesn't have to fight the same fight. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility and the possibility of it. Rivera stood and returned to his seat. Marcus turned back to the window as the plane accelerated down the runway. The nose lifted. The ground fell away. They were airborne, climbing into the gray Boston sky. Marcus Bennett, 22 years old, MIT graduate future cybersecurity director, was flying to London in seat 1A. Not because someone gave him permission, but because he belonged there, and that made all the difference. The flight leveled off at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign chimed off. The cabin crew began their service, moving through the aisles with practiced efficiency. Helen Torres, the new senior purser, approached Marcus with a menu. Mr. Bennett, we have grilled salmon with asparagus, herb-roasted chicken with fingerling potatoes, or a vegetarian risotto. What would you prefer? Marcus looked at the menu, overwhelmed by the choices. The salmon, please. Excellent choice. And a drink. Just water is fine. Helen smiled warmly. I'll bring you sparkling water from Italy. It's exceptional. As she moved away, Marcus realized he was actually going to eat in first class. After everything that had happened, he was staying. He'd won. But it didn't feel like victory yet. It felt surreal, like a dream he might wake from at any moment. Maxwell had his laptop open, working on something, but he looked up when the meal service arrived. The food was exquisite, presented like art on fine china. Marcus picked at it, barely tasting anything. His mind was still spinning. Across the aisle, Amanda Cross ate her meal in silence. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. She kept glancing at Marcus with an expression that might have been guilt or might have been fear that he'd sue her. Probably both. Thomas Hayes worked on his laptop, occasionally making notes in a legal pad. The recording he'd made was safe, backed up to 3 different cloud services. Whatever happened next, there would be evidence. James Rivera read a book, but wasn't really seeing the words. He kept thinking about the moments in his own life when he'd stayed silent, when he'd let injustice happen, because speaking up felt too risky. He'd told himself he was being practical, protecting himself. But watching Marcus's courage had shown him what he'd really been doing, protecting his comfort at someone else's expense. The meal service continued. Passengers ate and drank and tried to pretend the last hour hadn't happened. But it had, and the weight of it filled the cabin like smoke. Sophia Martinez moved through her duties with a new energy. The promotion Maxwell had given her wasn't just about money or status. It was about being seen, being valued for doing the right thing. She'd spent 3 months watching Victoria Ashford's cruelty and telling herself there was nothing she could do. Now she knew that was a lie she'd told herself. There was always something you could do, even if it cost you something. She approached Marcus as he finished his meal. How was everything, Mr. Bennett? Marcus looked up at her kind face. It was great. Thank you. Sophia hesitated, then spoke quietly. I need you to know something. I've watched Victoria do this before. Not exactly like this, but similar. Passengers who didn't fit her idea of what first class should look like. People with valid tickets who got moved, got harassed, got made to feel small. Marcus set down his fork. How many times Sophia's face was pained? I don't know. 4 or 5. Over the 3 months I've worked with her, I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. That she was senior, she knew the rules, she must have good reasons. She looked directly at Marcus. But there were no good reasons. There were just her biases and my cowardice. I'm sorry. You spoke up today, Marcus said. That's what matters. Sophia shook her head. It shouldn't have taken the chairman showing up for me to find my courage. That's on me. She straightened her shoulders. But I promise you, Mr. Bennett, I will never be silent again. If I see someone being treated the way you were, I will speak up, no matter the cost. Marcus felt something ease in his chest. That's all any of us can do. Be better tomorrow than we were today. Sophia nodded and moved on with her service. Her spine a little straighter, her sense of purpose renewed. An hour into the flight, Maxwell closed his laptop and turned his attention to Marcus. Ready to talk about the future? Marcus swiveled in his seat to face him. Yes, sir. Maxwell pulled out a tablet, opened a file. Here's what I'm proposing. Atlas Airways creates a new division, aviation cybersecurity. You're the director. You build the team, set the priorities, report directly to me. Marcus listened, his heart racing. Your thesis identified 17 major vulnerabilities in our systems. Maxwell continued. I want them all addressed within 6 months. I want you to audit our partners, our vendors, our entire digital infrastructure. Find the weaknesses before our enemies do. That's a massive undertaking, Marcus said, which is why you'll have a budget of $5 million in your first year and authorization to hire a team of 12. Maxwell replied. I'm not asking you to do this alone. I'm asking you to lead it. Marcus's mind was already racing with possibilities. Systems audits, penetration testing, encryption protocols, staff training. This wasn't just a job. This was a chance to make aviation safer for millions of passengers. What about NextSec? Marcus asked. Do the interview tomorrow, Maxwell said. Be honest with them about my offer. If they want to counter, let them. Competition makes everyone better. He leaned forward. But Marcus, I'm not just offering you a job. I'm offering you a mission. Help me build an airline that's not only safe but equitable, where every passenger, regardless of what they look like or how they dress, is treated with dignity. Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility. It was enormous. It was terrifying. It was exactly what he wanted. I'll think about it, Marcus said. After the interview, Maxwell smiled. That's all I ask. They shook hands across the seats, and Marcus felt the future opening up before him like a runway clear and ready. The rest of the flight passed in a blur of conversation. Maxwell asked about Marcus's thesis, about his ideas for implementation, about his vision for the future of aviation security. They talked for hours, ideas flowing, the age difference and status difference melting away in the face of shared passion for the work. Other passengers noticed, saw the chairman of the airline in deep conversation with the kid in the hoodie. Some felt shame. Some felt curiosity. All of them recalibrated their assumptions about who Marcus Bennett was and what he represented. As the sun set over the Atlantic painting, the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marcus looked out the window and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because the fight was over. The fight would never be over. There would always be another Victoria Ashford, another Derek Morrison, another space where he had to prove he belonged. But today, on this flight, he'd won. He'd kept his dignity. He'd stood his ground. And he'd been seen, really seen by someone who mattered. That was enough. For now, that was enough. The cabin lights had dimmed for the overnight portion of the flight. Most passengers were sleeping or watching movies with headphones on. The soft hum of the engines created a cocoon of white noise. Maxwell had reclined his seat slightly still, working on his tablet. Marcus should have been sleeping, preparing for the interview tomorrow, but his mind wouldn't slow down. He kept replaying the confrontation, Victoria's sneer, the moment when Maxwell's voice cut through everything. Unable to sleep, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and turned around to face Maxwell. Can I ask you something? Maxwell looked up from his work reading glasses perched on his nose. Of course. Why did you really get on this flight? The truth. Maxwell set down his tablet, removed his glasses, and met Marcus's eyes. The truth is complicated. I can handle complicated. Maxwell considered for a moment. NextSec contacted me 3 weeks ago about the partnership. They sent me your thesis. I read it, was impressed. Asked my team to do some background research on you. Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety. Background research, public information only, Maxwell assured him. Your academic record, your publications, any public statements. We don't invade privacy, but we do our due diligence. He leaned forward. What I found was remarkable. Full scholarship to MIT, despite coming from a struggling school district in Detroit. Perfect attendance, despite your mother working nights and you often caring for yourself. Academic awards, research, grants, teaching assistant positions. But what impressed me most was a video of you speaking at a computer science conference last year. Marcus remembered that. It had been terrifying speaking to a room full of professionals when he was still a student. You talked about democratizing cybersecurity education, Maxwell continued, about how the field is dominated by people who come from privilege, who can afford expensive boot camps and degrees. You outlined a program for bringing security training to underserved communities. I didn't think anyone important saw that, Marcus said quietly. I saw it, and I thought this is someone who understands that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. Someone who wants to change that. Maxwell's expression grew more serious. My father, the mechanic I told you about, he used to say something to me when I was a kid. He'd say, Leonard, rich people think they're better because they have more. Don't ever confuse having more with being more. Marcus felt those words settle into his bones. When I started Atlas Airways, Maxwell continued, I wanted to build something that proved my father right. That showed value comes from ability, not from wealth or appearance or background. I wanted to create opportunities for people like my father. People like you. People who deserved a chance and never got one. He looked at Marcus directly, but somewhere along the way I lost sight of that. I got comfortable, focused on profits and roots and market share, let the culture drift, hired people like Victoria Ashford and never questioned whether they shared my values. You couldn't have known, Marcus started. I should have known, Maxwell interrupted. Regular audits would have caught it. Anonymous feedback systems, better oversight. I got complacent and passengers paid the price. You paid the price. He leaned back, his face showing genuine pain. Do you know how many Marcus Bennetts have been thrown off my planes over the years? How many brilliant people were judged by Victoria Ashford's narrow standards and never given a chance? Marcus didn't answer because there was no answer. I don't know either, Maxwell said. But the number is higher than 0, and that's unacceptable. So when NextSec told me about you, when I read your work and saw your potential, I decided to do something I rarely do. I decided to get directly involved. You flew to Boston just to meet me. I flew to Boston to offer you a job, yes, but also to see if my airline still had the culture I thought I'd built. To see if a young black man in casual clothes could board first class without incident. Marcus felt a chill. You were testing the system. I was hoping the system would pass. Maxwell's voice was heavy. It failed spectacularly. What would you have done if you hadn't been here? Marcus asked. If I'd just been thrown off and you found out later, Maxwell's jaw tightened. I would have reinstated you, fired Victoria, compensated you financially. But I couldn't have given you back your dignity. Couldn't have erased the humiliation. Some harm can't be undone, only prevented. That's why you intervened so forcefully. That's why I will always intervene forcefully, Maxwell corrected. Because every person who boards my aircraft deserves respect. That's not negotiable. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Can I tell you what I was thinking? Marcus asked. Right before you walked on. Please, I was thinking about my mom. about how I'd have to call her and tell her I missed the interview because I got thrown off a plane, how I'd have to explain that her years of sacrifice, her double shifts, her going without, so I could have all of it was for nothing because some flight attendant decided I didn't belong. Marcus's voice cracked. I was thinking about how I'd have to tell her that her son, the MIT graduate, the one who was supposed to break the cycle, got treated like a criminal for trying to sit in a seat he paid for. Maxwell's face showed deep empathy. And the worst part, Marcus continued. The worst part was knowing she'd tell me it was okay. That she'd comfort me instead of me comforting her. That she'd say, we'd figure something else out, find another opportunity, keep fighting. Because that's what she's always done, absorbed the blows meant for me and kept moving forward. He wiped his eyes. So when you walked onto that plane, when you stopped Victoria, when you saw me, really saw me, you didn't just save my job opportunity. You saved me from having to break my mother's heart. Maxwell was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'd like to meet your mother. Marcus blinked. What when we land in London, I want you to call her. I want to tell her personally what her son did today, how he stood his ground with grace, how he maintained his dignity when everything was stacked against him, how proud she should be. Maxwell's voice was firm. And I want to tell her that her sacrifices weren't in vain, that her son is extraordinary, and I'm honored to have the chance to work with him, whether that's at Atlas or NextSec or wherever he chooses. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, now couldn't stop them, didn't try to. Thank you. That would mean everything to her. What's her name, Diane? Diane Bennett. Maxwell made a note on his tablet. Diane Bennett. I'll make sure she knows her son is remarkable. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing naturally between professional plans and personal stories. Maxwell told Marcus about growing up watching his father's dignity being chipped away day by day. Marcus told Maxwell about the guidance counselor who told him MIT was unrealistic, and the professor who later told him he was the best student she'd taught in 20 years. They talked about the weight of being first, the pressure of representing an entire community every time you walked into a room. They talked about the exhaustion of constantly proving yourself, of never being given the benefit of the doubt. And they talked about hope, about the possibility that things could change, that the next generation might face less of what they'd faced, that progress was slow but real. As the conversation wound down, Marcus yawned, finally feeling the exhaustion of the day catching up with him. Get some sleep, Maxwell said gently. Big day tomorrow. Marcus reclined his seat, pulled the soft blanket over himself. Thank you, he said one more time, for everything. Thank you, Maxwell replied, for reminding me why I started this airline in the first place. Marcus closed his eyes and for the first time in hours felt safe. The leather seat cradled him like a cloud. The cabin was quiet except for the steady hum of engines. Around him, in the darkness, other passengers slept. But Marcus wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about his mother, about the phone call he'd make from London, about how he'd tell her the job offer, the salary, the signing bonus that would pay off her mortgage. He was thinking about how her voice would break when she cried, how she'd tell him she always knew he could do it, even when he doubted himself. He was thinking about how she'd ask if he was safe, if he was happy, if he was taking care of himself, because those were always her first questions before anything about success or money. And he was thinking about how he'd tell her about Maxwell, about a man who'd built an empire, but never forgot where he came from. About someone who used his power to protect instead of to dominate. As sleep finally pulled him under, Marcus Bennett smiled. Tomorrow he'd wake up in London. Tomorrow he'd interview at NextSec. Tomorrow his future would unfold in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, flying over the Atlantic in Seat 1A, he was exactly where he belonged. Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of fresh coffee. He'd slept for 5 hours, the deepest sleep he'd had in weeks. His body was still on Boston time, but his mind felt clear. Helen Torres appeared with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. We'll be landing in about 90 minutes. Can I get you some breakfast?" "Yes, please. Whatever you recommend." "The breakfast is exceptional. I'll bring you the full English with fresh fruit and pastries." As Helen moved away, Marcus stretched and looked around the cabin. Most passengers were awake now, some working on laptops, others reading. The mood had shifted overnight. The tension from boarding had dissipated, replaced by a careful courtesy. Amanda Cross, in 1B, made brief eye contact with Marcus, then looked away quickly. She'd spent the night thinking about what she'd done, about how quickly she'd sided with Victoria, about what that said about her character. The reflection wasn't pleasant. Thomas Hayes was reviewing his notes from the recording, preparing a summary for Maxwell's legal team. As an attorney, he'd seen plenty of discrimination cases, but rarely had he witnessed one unfold so completely and be addressed so swiftly. This would be a case study. James Rivera was reading a book on sustainable architecture, but his mind kept drifting back to the conversation with Marcus. The younger man's courage had awakened something in Rivera, a sense that silence was no longer acceptable. He made a mental note to be more active in his firm's diversity initiatives when he returned. Maxwell was already working his laptop open, making notes about policy changes. He'd drafted new training requirements, oversight protocols, and a passenger bill of rights that would be implemented across all Atlas Airways flights within 60 days. Sophia Martinez was going through her duties with renewed purpose. She'd spent the night thinking about what Maxwell had said about building a culture of respect. She understood now that culture didn't build itself. It required constant vigilance, constant courage, constant willingness to speak up, even when it was uncomfortable. The breakfast arrived, and it was indeed exceptional. Marcus ate slowly, savoring each bite, still not quite believing this was real. The grilled tomatoes, the perfectly cooked eggs, the crispy bacon, the fresh berries. It was the kind of meal he'd seen in movies but never imagined eating himself. As he finished, Maxwell leaned forward from 2A. "Feeling ready for your interview?" Marcus wiped his mouth with the linen napkin. Nervous, but ready. "Good. Nervous means you care. Just remember you're not going there to beg for a job. You're going there to see if they're worthy of your talent." Marcus smiled at the reframing. "I'll try to remember that. And Marcus, whatever you decide, NextSec or Atlas, make sure it's what you want, not what you think you should want, not what would make others happy, what truly excites you." "What excites me is making things more secure," Marcus said. "I love finding vulnerabilities, solving puzzles, protecting people who don't even know they need protection." "Then that's your North Star," Maxwell said. "Any company that lets you do that work at the highest level, that's where you belong." The plane began its descent toward Heathrow. The English countryside unfolded below green and gray and drizzling. Marcus had never been to London before. Everything from this point forward was going to be new. The landing was smooth. The plane taxied to the gate. Passengers began gathering their belongings, preparing to disembark. Maxwell stood and extended his hand to Marcus one final time. "Good luck today. And remember, this is just the beginning." "Thank you, sir. For everything. Call me Leonard. We're colleagues now, whether you choose Atlas or not." They shook hands, and Marcus felt the weight of possibility in that grip. As passengers began deplaning, Sophia approached Marcus. "Mr. Bennett, it was an honor to serve you on this flight. And again, I'm so sorry for what happened during boarding." "You already apologized," Marcus said gently. "And I already forgave you. Don't carry that guilt forever, Sophia. Use it to be better." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I will. I promise." Thomas Hayes stopped on his way out. "Mr. Bennett, I sent the recording to Maxwell's legal team and CC'd you on the email. Whatever happens next, you have documentation." "I appreciate it," Marcus said. James Rivera clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Remember, if you need anything in London, call me." "Seriously. Anything." "I will. Thank you." Even Amanda Cross paused, though she couldn't quite meet Marcus's eyes. "Mr. Bennett, I owe you an apology. A real one. What I said during boarding was wrong. I'm sorry." Marcus looked at her, saw genuine remorse, and nodded. "Thank you. I appreciate that." She hurried off the plane before her composure could crack completely. When the cabin had cleared, Marcus gathered his backpack and walked toward the exit. Helen Torres stood at the door. "Mr. Bennett," she said warmly, "welcome to London. I hope your interview goes brilliantly." "Thank you, Helen. And thank you for the excellent service. That's what we're here for. All of us, for all of our passengers equally." The jet bridge was cold the London morning, seeping in through gaps. Marcus walked through it and into Heathrow Terminal 5, one of the busiest airports in the world. He made his way through customs, collected his checked luggage containing his interview suit, and headed for the exit. The next SEC interview was in 4 hours. He'd go to his hotel shower, change, and prepare. But first, he needed to make a phone call. Marcus found a quiet corner of the terminal and dialed his mother's number. It was 3 a.m. in Detroit, but she'd told him to call when he landed regardless of the time. She answered on the second ring. "Baby, you okay?" Marcus smiled, hearing the concern in her voice that was always there no matter what. "I'm okay, Mom. I'm in London." "Oh, thank God. How was the flight?" Marcus took a breath. "Mom, I need to tell you something. And it's going to sound crazy, but I need you to listen to the whole thing before you react." "Okay. Okay, baby. You're scaring me." So Marcus told her. All of it. Victoria's accusations, the humiliation the other passengers piling on the moment he'd almost given up. Then Maxwell's arrival, the intervention, the revelation, the job offer. Diane Bennett listened in silence, and Marcus could hear her breathing change as the story unfolded. When he finished, there was a long pause. Then his mother spoke, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Someone tried to throw my baby off a plane for wearing a hoodie." "Yeah, Mom. And this Maxwell man. He's the chairman." "Yeah." Another pause. "Is he still there? Can I talk to him?" Marcus was surprised. "You want to talk to him?" "Yes. Right now." Marcus looked around the terminal, spotted Maxwell standing near the baggage claim with his assistants. "Hold on, Mom." He walked over. Maxwell turned surprised to see him. "My mom wants to talk to you," Marcus said, holding out his phone. Maxwell's eyebrows rose, but he took the phone. "Mrs. Bennett, this is Leonard Maxwell." Marcus watched Maxwell's face as his mother spoke. He couldn't hear her words, but he saw Maxwell's expression soften. "Mrs. Bennett, I assure you what happened to your son was unacceptable and has been addressed. The staff member responsible has been terminated." "Yes, ma'am. I understand your concern." "No, ma'am, I didn't do anything special. I simply treated your son with the respect he deserved." "You raised an extraordinary young man, Mrs. Bennett. You should be very proud." Maxwell listened for another moment, then smiled. "I'd be honored to meet you as well, perhaps when Marcus returns to the States." "Yes, ma'am. Here he is." He handed the phone back to Marcus. "Your mother is formidable." Marcus put the phone to his ear. "Mom, I like him," Diane said. "He sounds like he has sense." Marcus laughed. "He does. You be good at that interview, baby. Show them what you're made of." "I will." And Marcus, "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. Not because of job offers or money, Because you stood up for yourself. Because you didn't let them make you small. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I learned that from you, Mom. I know you did. Now go get ready. You've got work to do. Love you, Mom. Love you more, baby. Marcus hung up and looked at Maxwell. She approves. I'm relieved, Maxwell said with a smile. Now go. Your interview awaits. Marcus's hotel was in Canary Wharf, the gleaming financial district of London, where glass towers reached toward perpetually gray skies. The room NECSEC had booked for him was on the 23rd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames. He stood at the window for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Less than a day ago, he'd been in Boston, nervous but hopeful. Now he was in London, with 2 job offers, potentially on the table, having survived one of the most humiliating experiences of his life, and come out the other side stronger. Marcus showered, letting the hot water wash away the stress of the flight. He put on his interview suit, navy blue, with a crisp white shirt and a burgundy tie his mother had bought him for graduation. He looked at himself in the mirror. Same face, same mind, same Marcus, but somehow different. He grabbed his portfolio, checked his phone for directions to NECSEC's offices, and headed out. The NECSEC headquarters were in a converted warehouse near the financial district, all exposed brick and modern tech aesthetic. Marcus arrived 20 minutes early, checked in with reception, and was asked to wait in a lounge area that looked like it had been designed for a tech magazine photo shoot. At exactly 10 a.m., a young woman with purple-streaked hair and a tablet appeared. Marcus Bennett. That's me. I'm Zara, recruiting coordinator. The team is ready for you. Follow me. She led him through an open office floor where dozens of people worked at standing desks surrounded by multiple monitors. The energy was palpable, creative, collaborative. This was where he'd imagined himself working someday. Zara opened a glass-walled conference room where 3 people waited. This is Marcus Bennett. Marcus, meet Dr. Sarah Chen, our CTO, James Okafor, head of security, and Tom Harrison, senior developer. They shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and settled into chairs around the table. Dr. Chen spoke first. Marcus, we've reviewed your thesis extensively. Your analysis of passenger manifest vulnerabilities was exceptional. Can you walk us through your methodology? For the next hour, Marcus discussed his research, his findings, his recommendations. He explained how he'd identified the weaknesses, how he'd tested them ethically within MIT's frameworks, how he'd proposed solutions that balanced security with user experience. James Okafor asked probing questions about encryption protocols. Tom Harrison challenged some of his assumptions about legacy systems. Dr. Chen wanted to know about his vision for the future of aviation security. Marcus answered every question with growing confidence. This was his element. This was where his mind came alive. They took a break for coffee and pastries. As they reconvened, Dr. Chen's demeanor shifted slightly. Marcus, I need to be upfront with you about something. We received a call this morning from Leonard Maxwell. Marcus's stomach dropped. What did he say? Dr. Chen smiled. He told us what happened on your flight. He also told us that he'd offered you a position at Atlas Airways. The room went quiet. I was going to tell you, Marcus said. I promised him I'd do this interview regardless, and I meant it. We appreciate that, Dr. Chen said. Integrity matters to us. Maxwell was clear that you'd be making your decision based on merit, not pressure. Tom Harrison leaned forward. So let's talk about merit. Here's what we can offer. For the next 30 minutes, they outlined the position. Security analyst reporting to James Okafor. Salary of $165,000. Equity package. Relocation support. Opportunity to work on cutting-edge threat detection. It was an incredible offer. Everything Marcus had dreamed of. But James Okafor said Maxwell mentioned something interesting. He said you could split your time between companies if you wanted. Work for us primarily, but consult for Atlas on aviation-specific projects. You'd be willing to do that? Marcus asked. We think it makes sense, Dr. Chen said. You'd get broader experience. We'd benefit from your insights into a major client's systems. Atlas would get your expertise on their specific vulnerabilities. Everyone wins. Tom Harrison smiled. Plus having Leonard Maxwell as a reference for your work with us. That's pretty valuable. Marcus's mind was racing. This wasn't just one opportunity or the other. This was both combined, amplified. Can I think about it? Marcus asked. Of course, Dr. Chen said. We'd like an answer within a week, but take the time you need. They shook hands, exchanged contact information, and Marcus was escorted back to the lobby. Outside London, drizzle had started that fine mist that wasn't quite rain, but soaked you through anyway. Marcus stood under the NECSEC awning, pulled out his phone, and called Maxwell. The chairman answered immediately. How did it go? They offered me the job, and they suggested the split arrangement you mentioned. What do you think? I think I want both, Marcus said. I think I want to work for NECSEC and consult for Atlas. Get the startup experience and the enterprise exposure. Build relationships in both worlds. Maxwell's voice carried approval. That's smart thinking. You'll learn faster, build a broader network, and you'll be valuable to both organizations. So you're okay with it? More than okay. I'll have our legal team draft a consulting agreement. Flexible hours, project-based work compensation that reflects your split focus. Thank you, Marcus said. For everything. For the offer, for the opportunity, for stepping onto that plane and stopping what was happening. Maxwell's voice was warm. Thank you for reminding me why I started this company. Sometimes we need someone to shake us awake. They talked logistics for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. Marcus stood in the London drizzle phone in hand, feeling like his life had just transformed completely. He walked back to his hotel too energized to take the tube. The streets of London unfolded around him, red buses and black cabs and centuries-old buildings next to glass towers. He'd never been here before, but it already felt like a place where he could belong. Back in his hotel room, Marcus video called his mother. She answered from her kitchen in Detroit, still in her nurse's scrubs from the day shift. Baby. How did it go? Marcus told her everything. The interview, the offer, the split arrangement, the combined salary that would be well over $200,000 when both positions were calculated. Diane Bennett stared at her phone screen, mouth open. $200,000, plus equity, plus bonuses, plus Marcus's voice cracked, plus enough in my signing bonus from Atlas to pay off your house. His mother started crying. Deep soul-shaking sobs of relief and joy and disbelief. Mom, Marcus said gently, you're quitting both jobs. Tonight. Baby, I can't just... Yes, you can. I'm wiring money to your account right now, enough to cover 6 months of everything. You're done working doubles, done working nights, done sacrificing for me. Diane wiped her eyes. What am I supposed to do with myself? Rest, Marcus said. Travel. Take that art class you always wanted. Live, Mom. Actually live. They talked for another hour. Diane cried more, laughed more, asked a million questions about London and the jobs and when she could visit. Marcus answered everything, his heart full to bursting with the knowledge that he'd finally been able to give back to the woman who'd given him everything. When they hung up, Marcus lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. 24 hours ago, he'd been boarding a plane in Boston, nervous about an interview. Now, he had 2 jobs, had changed his mother's life, and had survived an ordeal that would have broken many people. He thought about Victoria Ashford, wondered where she was, what she was doing. Probably on a flight back to the States, her career in ruins, her perfect control shattered. He thought about Derek Morrison, banned from Atlas Airways, facing questions from his firm about why their corporate contract was at risk. He thought about the silent passengers who'd watched and done nothing until Thomas Hayes and James Rivera found their courage. And he thought about Leonard Maxwell, a billionaire who could have ignored the scene, could have dealt with it quietly later, but instead had stepped in immediately and made it right. Marcus closed his eyes, and for the first time in years felt something like peace. Not because the fight was over. The fight would never be over. But because today on Flight 617 he'd won. London had become Marcus's second home. He'd found a flat in Shoreditch trendy and affordable with roommates who were also working in tech. He split his time between NextSec's offices in Canary Wharf and remote consulting work for Atlas Airways flying between London and New York every other week. The work was exactly what he'd imagined. Challenging, fulfilling, meaningful. At NextSec, he was part of a team developing next-generation threat detection algorithms. For Atlas, he was systematically addressing every vulnerability he'd identified in his thesis, implementing security protocols that would protect millions of passengers. Leonard Maxwell had become more than a boss. He was a mentor, a guide, someone who understood the weight of being first, of representing, of carrying expectations that weren't fair, but were real nonetheless. They had lunch every week when Marcus was in New York, talking about business leadership life. Sophia Martinez had thrived in her promotion. She'd implemented new training for junior flight attendants, emphasizing dignity and respect for all passengers. She'd become a voice in staff meetings, challenging policies that seemed arbitrary or discriminatory. The culture was changing slowly but measurably. The NextSec Atlas partnership had grown beyond Marcus's work. The two companies were collaborating on a comprehensive aviation security framework that other airlines were starting to adopt. Marcus's thesis, once a student project, was becoming industry standard. His mother had visited London twice, staying in Marcus's flat, marveling at her son's new life. She'd quit both jobs, enrolled in an online art degree program she'd always dreamed of, and was for the first time in decades happy. The story of what happened on Flight 617 had leaked, of course. Passengers had talked. Thomas Hayes's recording had made its way to journalism circles. Articles appeared in aviation industry publications, then mainstream media, about the passenger who'd almost been thrown off a plane and ended up transforming airline security. Marcus gave one interview to a tech magazine in which he spoke carefully about discrimination, about dignity, about the importance of systems that protect everyone equally. He didn't name Victoria or Derek or any of the silent passengers. He focused on the solution, not the problem. But the industry noticed. Other airlines were reviewing their policies, their training, their culture. Marcus received speaking invitations, consulting requests, job offers. He politely declined. He was exactly where he wanted to be. Victoria Ashford lived in a different world now. Her apartment in Boston was smaller, cheaper, in a neighborhood she'd once driven through without really seeing. Her wardrobe still included her old designer pieces, but they felt like costumes, now relics from a life that no longer existed. She'd applied to every airline, all rejected. The aviation industry was smaller than people thought, and word had spread. Gross misconduct, racial profiling, terminated for cause. The phrases followed her like shadows. She worked retail now at a department store in downtown Boston. The pay was a fraction of what she'd made at Atlas. The respect was non-existent. Customers were rude. Managers were dismissive. She was just another employee, easily replaced. One afternoon, 6 weeks after the incident, a young woman came into the store. She was black, in her mid-20s, wearing medical scrubs. She was looking for a professional blazer for a job interview. Victoria helped her professionally, politely. As they talked, the woman mentioned she was nervous about the interview. "I've been turned down before," the woman said, browsing the rack. "They said I didn't present professionally enough, whatever that means." Victoria froze the hanger in her hand, suddenly feeling heavy. She saw herself in that moment. Saw what she'd done to Marcus, to how many others over the years. Saw how her judgments had shaped lives, closed doors, made people feel small. The woman selected a blazer, tried it on, looked at herself in the mirror, with a mix of hope and fear that Victoria recognized too well. "You look perfect," Victoria said quietly. "Professional, polished. They'd be lucky to have you." The woman smiled. "Thank you. That actually helps." After the woman left, Victoria sat in the employee break room staring at her coffee. She thought about Marcus Bennett, wondered where he was, what he was doing. She'd seen the articles, knew he was thriving. The kid she'd tried to throw off the plane was changing the industry she'd been fired from. The irony was crushing. Victoria didn't get a redemption arc. She didn't become a changed person overnight. But she was beginning to see, really see what she'd done and who she'd been. And that seeing that painful recognition was the first step toward something different. She'd lost everything because of her prejudice, her career, her status, her sense of self. But maybe somewhere in that loss, she could find something true. Not forgiveness. She didn't deserve that. But understanding. Of how much damage one person's biases could do. Of how quickly judgment could become cruelty. Of how important it was to see people really see them beyond the surface. Victoria finished her coffee, adjusted her department store name tag, and went back to the floor. She had 5 more hours of her shift. Tomorrow she'd wake up and do it again. And maybe eventually she'd figure out who she was supposed to be, now that she couldn't be who she'd been. Derek Morrison's managing partners had not been pleased. The call from Leonard Maxwell had been professional, but devastating. Atlas Airways was restructuring their corporate contract with Blackstone Mercer, removing Derek's access, reducing the firm's travel benefits, and making it clear that Derek's behavior had damaged a valuable relationship. His partners wanted answers. They wanted to know what had happened, why a senior partner had been banned from a major airline, why their contract was being renegotiated because of his actions. Derek tried to explain, tried to make it sound less damaging than it was. But Thomas Hayes's recording had been leaked, and several of his partners had heard it. Heard him mocking Marcus. Heard him supporting Victoria's harassment. Heard him threatening to pull his business unless the kid was removed. The vote was unanimous. Derek was demoted from senior partner to of counsel, a humiliating demotion that stripped him of his leadership role, his voting rights, his prestige. His salary was cut by 40%. His office was moved to a smaller space. His assistant was reassigned. His name was removed from the letterhead. Derek still worked at Blackstone Mercer, but he was a ghost now, a cautionary tale whispered about in conference rooms. He saw Marcus's face sometimes in articles in industry publications. The kid in the hoodie was now the face of aviation security innovation featured in Forbes, quoted in the Wall Street Journal speaking at conferences. The person Derek had dismissed as not belonging in first class was now someone every executive in the industry wanted to meet. Derek understood the lesson. He just understood it too late. His Rolex still told perfect time. His Italian shoes were still polished. His 3-piece suits still fit impeccably. But none of it meant what it used to mean. Authority didn't come from appearance. Respect wasn't automatic. Worth had to be earned, not assumed. Derek Morrison had learned that the hard way, and unlike Victoria, who was beginning to understand what she'd done, Derek just felt angry. Angry at Marcus for being on that flight. Angry at Maxwell for overreacting. Angry at his partners for not supporting him. Angry at the world for changing in ways he didn't understand and couldn't accept. Some people learned from their mistakes. Others just found new people to blame. Derek Morrison was the latter. And he would stay that way. Diane Bennett stood in her kitchen in Detroit looking out the window at the garden she was finally having time to tend. Tomatoes were coming in bright red against green leaves. Sunflowers towered along the fence. Herbs sprawled in neat beds she'd built herself. For the first time in 20 years, she wasn't exhausted. Her mortgage was paid off, the satisfaction letter from the bank framed and hanging in her living room. She'd quit both jobs, walked away from the nurse's station and the diner counter, and never looked back. She was taking an online degree in fine arts, something she'd dreamed about since high school but never had time or money for. Her professors thought she had talent. She thought she just had time, finally, to try. Marcus called her twice a week video chat from London or New York or wherever his work took him. She got to see his face, see him happy, see him thriving in ways she'd always known he would, but had been too afraid to hope for completely. He'd sent her a first-class ticket to London for Christmas. First class on Atlas Airways, with a personal note from Leonard Maxwell, thanking her for raising such an exceptional young man. Diane had cried when she'd opened that envelope. Not because of the ticket, though, that was overwhelming, but because someone had seen her son's worth, really seen it, and had taken the time to thank her for her part in creating it. She thought sometimes about that flight attendant Victoria, wondered if the woman understood what she'd almost stolen, not just a job opportunity, but Marcus's faith in himself. His belief that hard work and intelligence mattered more than appearance. If Maxwell hadn't been there, if Marcus had been thrown off that plane, if the humiliation had landed without intervention, would Marcus have recovered? Would he have made it to the interview? Would he be where he was now? Diane didn't know. But she was grateful every day that she didn't have to find out. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Mom got the invitation to speak at MIT's graduation next year. They want me to give the commencement address. Can you believe it? Diane smiled, typed back. I've always believed it, baby. So proud of you. She set down her phone and went back to her garden. The sun was warm on her shoulders. The soil was rich under her hands. Her back didn't hurt from double shifts. Her feet didn't ache from standing all day. This was what freedom felt like. Not wealth, though the financial security was life-changing, but freedom from the weight of worry, freedom to rest, freedom to dream. Her son had given that to her, and she'd given him the foundation that made everything else possible. Fair trade, she thought. More than fair. Perfect. Marcus stood at the window of his office at Atlas Airways headquarters in New York, looking out at the skyline. The city stretched out before him, infinite with possibility. His title plate sat on the desk behind him, Marcus Bennett, Director of Aviation Cybersecurity. He still wasn't used to seeing it, still felt a flutter of disbelief every time he read those words. It had been 6 weeks since Flight 617. 6 weeks since Victoria Ashford had tried to throw him off the plane. 6 weeks since Leonard Maxwell had changed his life with 3 words. Stop this immediately. In those 6 weeks, Marcus had hired a team of 8 specialists in network security encryption threat assessment. They'd closed 12 major vulnerabilities in Atlas's systems. They'd prevented 2 attempted breaches. They'd saved the airline millions and protected thousands of passengers who would never know how close they'd come to danger. The work was exactly what he'd imagined when he'd written his thesis at MIT. It was challenging, meaningful, important. He was making aviation safer, one system at a time. But more than that, he was proving something. Not to Victoria, not to Derek. Not to the silent passengers who'd watched his humiliation and said nothing. He was proving it to himself. That he belonged. Not because someone gave him permission, not because his ticket was valid, but because his mind, his work, his contribution were undeniable. His phone buzzed. Text from his mother. Just registered for my painting class, starting next week. Thank you for giving me this chance, baby. Marcus smiled, typed back. You gave me every chance. This is just me returning the favor. Love you, Mom. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. The double shifts his mother had worked, the scholarships that had opened doors, the professors who'd seen potential, the thesis that had caught Maxwell's attention, the flight where everything had almost fallen apart, the intervention that had saved it all. It wasn't just one moment. It was 1,000 moments, 1,000 choices, 1,000 people who'd helped or hindered or simply witnessed. But standing here now in his office with his name on the door, Marcus understood something fundamental. Your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it. He'd been brilliant on Flight 617, whether Victoria saw it or not. His MIT degree hadn't appeared when Maxwell boarded the plane. It had been there the whole time. His value wasn't contingent on validation, but validation mattered anyway. Because humans were social creatures, and being seen, really seen, was a basic need. Maxwell had seen him, had stopped the degradation, had offered opportunity, had used his power to protect instead of to dominate. That was the difference between having power and being powerful. Victoria had power, the authority of her position, but she wasn't powerful. She was small, afraid, wielding control to mask insecurity. Maxwell was powerful. He could destroy careers with a phone call, but he used that power judiciously, righteously to defend those who needed defending. Marcus wanted to be like that. Not just successful, but powerful in the right way. Using whatever influence he gained to lift others up, to challenge injustice, to create opportunities. A knock on his door. His assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Bennett, you have a meeting with the security team in 10 minutes. Marcus grabbed his laptop, his notes, his coffee. On his way out, he passed a young intern in the hallway, a black woman who looked nervous on her first day. Marcus stopped. "Hey, first day?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm trying to find conference room B. Follow me. I'm headed that way." They walked together. "You nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted. Marcus smiled. "That's normal, but remember you earned this spot. You belong here. Don't let anyone tell you different." The intern's face brightened. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett." They reached the conference room. Marcus watched her head inside her spine a little straighter, her confidence a little stronger. He'd been her 6 weeks ago. Afraid, uncertain, needing someone to see him. Now he could be that person for someone else. That was how change happened. Not in grand gestures, but in small moments of recognition. Marcus headed to his meeting ready to do the work, ready to be powerful in the right way. You know, I've shared hundreds of stories on this channel. Stories about injustice, about people being underestimated, about karma finally catching up. But Marcus Bennett's story stays with me differently, because it's not just about one flight attendant who made a terrible choice. It's about all the systems that made that choice possible. The silent passengers who watched, the colleague who piled on, the culture that allowed profiling to masquerade as standards. Here's what I learned from Marcus's story that I want to share with you. First lesson. Your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it. Marcus was brilliant, whether Victoria saw it or not. His MIT degree didn't appear when Maxwell boarded the plane. It was there the whole time. The only thing that changed was who had the power to acknowledge it. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? How many Marcus Bennetts are working retail, driving Uber, or stuck in jobs beneath their potential because someone like Victoria blocked their path and there was no Leonard Maxwell to stop it? Second lesson. Be a Leonard Maxwell, not a Victoria Ashford. When you see injustice, speak up. Use whatever power you have, even if it's just your voice, to say, "This is wrong." Thomas Hayes recorded. James Rivera spoke up. Sophia found her courage. Every act mattered. Third lesson. If you're a Marcus, if you've ever been told you don't belong, that you're not good enough, that you don't fit, know this. They're wrong. Your hoodie doesn't define you. Your sneakers don't limit you. Your brilliance will outlast their bigotry every single time. The people trying to keep you out of first class, they're not the ones who built the plane. Don't let them convince you where you belong. If this story resonated with you, if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of how they dress or where they come from, hit that subscribe button. Leave a like. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, dignity isn't something someone gives you. It's something you carry with you no matter what seat you're sitting in, no matter who tries to take it away. Your worth is inherent. Your potential is undeniable. Your future is yours to create. Don't let anyone tell you different. I'll see you in the next one. Keep fighting. Keep rising. And never ever let them tell you you're not enough.